It's great to see all of you here today. This is the fourth of 4 webinars presented to help with the pre-work for your on-site orientation at Lake Junaluska. So it's good to see you. As we get started today, I want to introduce myself to you. My name is Meg Lassiat, and I'm the Executive Director of Candidacy and Conference Relations at the General Board of Higher Education and Ministry. In that role, I work with cabinets and bishops and boards of ordained ministry, district committees on ordained ministry in resources and providing training as you credential candidates and clergy for a licensed and ordained ministry. So this is always a fun workshop, and I look forward to seeing you all in a couple weeks now at Lake Junaluska. I do want to invite you today to take the time to answer questions or to submit questions as they become, as we're working through the content. And Jason has already shown you how to do that, and we will respond as much as possible. And if I'm not able to get to one of your questions during the webinar, I will follow up with an email later on today. So where are you from? I know you've probably done this exercise with the other webinars that you've been participating in, but Jason, could you again walk us through this so we start to figure out who's with us today?
Sure, be happy to do that. So folks, in the upper left-hand corner of your screen, look for the pointer tool. Looks like an arrow icon, and click on that arrow icon to turn on the tool, and then click on the part of the world that you're joining us from today. And there we go, starting to see them pop up on the screen now.
Yep. Sometimes we get people from outside the U.S. I don't know if we have any superintendents attending the training this year from any of our central conferences.
All right, we've got quite a nice spread today, East Coast and West Coast.
Yes, all right. Well, thanks for doing that, and I look forward to meeting you in person, face-to-face, in just a couple of weeks. So what is covered at Lake Junaluska in the personnel workshop? We cover a lot of ground in this session, and so typically personnel includes all different kinds of employment issues, including such things as credentialing clergy and conference relations related to leaves of absence, leaving the ministry, whether that's voluntary or involuntary, and other kinds of status changes that happen along the way with our clergy. Much of your time will be spent supervising clergy, and so part of the responsibility for that is keeping the records and the files that you'll need to keep for everyone. So in the best situations, you'll want to mark someone's improvement over time, you'll want to mark their accomplishments, hopes for continuing formation and development. Sometimes you will need to document ineffective performance, and hopefully never, although judicial complaints or other involuntary status changes will arise. And when we get into that kind of a situation, the files become critical to the work that the bishop and the cabinet are trying to do on behalf of the annual conference. On the fun side of things, you work with people entering the candidacy process, both those who are requesting entry into the process and those who want to be licensed and ordained. You are a member of the District Committee on Ordained Minister who credentials the candidates. So we also talk about the DCOM, the licensing and ordination process, using UM-CARES, and your role in any conference relations status changes or an administrative fair process. Yesterday, I emailed to all of you a couple handouts. One was related to administrative fair process, and one was related to the steps for credentialing into licensed and ordained ministry. So I do encourage you to read through those handouts before we arrive, before we meet. We use those handouts to resource our discussions and a few of the exercises we do to try to help you learn and assimilate some of that information. So if you do have the chance to read those ahead of time, that would be helpful to you. I do know that this is a lot. I know that we cover a lot of ground in this workshop, and I know that your work in this area is critical in the recruitment, formation, and nurturing of candidates and clergy. I also think it's some of the most rewarding work you do. I greatly enjoy my work around discernment, enlistment, candidacy, credentialing of all kinds of clergy and candidates, and I hope that you find this to be a very fulfilling part of your work. And keep in mind, we aren't trying to get to a place where you have all of this committed to memory. Our hope is to broadly raise issues for consideration with you, and then make sure you know the resources you can use and rely on when you get to this part of your work. Okay, so what I have found is people come to the cabinet with all kinds of levels of service, either on district committees or on boards of ordained ministry. It's helpful for me as I'm making my final preparations to get a sense of the experience that you bring to this conversation. So take a second to read through this poll. Jason is going to guide us through how to complete it, and then read through this and select everything that applies to you on this list. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Meg. I've opened up the polling tool. You should see that little pop-up there on your screen. Take a moment and choose as many answers as are applicable to you. And then when you've done that, don't forget to click on the Submit button. So I have a couple of chats coming in for folks. If you're on a mobile device and you don't see the polling tool opened up, that's okay. It's just not supported on your mobile device. Okay, just a little bit of time left to complete the poll. If you haven't done so already, make sure that you click on the Submit button so that it gives me the green light and I don't cut you off there a little early. And all right, looks like everyone's completed the poll, so I'm going to go ahead and display the answers, and you should see those on your screen now.
All right, so most of us are in B, that you have served on a district committee, and many of you have served on the Board of Ordained Ministry, which is great. Those of you who have served on the Conference Relations Committee, I think you get a special award just for doing that. That is an intense job, and you meet people at a critical place in their lives. So thank you for your work in that area. Jason, I see a question has come in.
Yep, I'll take a look at that in just a second. Let me take down the polling results and toss the ball back over to you. There you go.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the first thing that we're going to talk about during our session is the supervisory and personnel files. Why do we spend some time talking about the files? It is certainly not the most fun thing that we do, but documentation related to clergy is critical for so many reasons. One area of your work will be to keep up-to-date and accurate files on the clergy that you supervise. Now, what I've found, and there are some varying practices by conferences, but the general GCFA guidelines do require that all clergy are required to have two types of files, a supervisory file and a personnel file. The personnel file is maintained by the conference secretary, and generally it includes information around the demographics, the appointments, and the clergy status of all conference clergy. It is the permanent record of service for the clergy person, and it basically begins when someone enters the candidacy process, starting with the District Committee on Ordained Ministry, and then that file accompanies them through their relationship with the Board of Ordained Ministry, and then into the conference secretary once they attain a permanent membership status with the conference. Supervisory files are separate from the personnel files. Those are maintained by you in cooperation with the bishop. The supervisory file includes evaluations, your notes, any letters of complaint or letters of accommodation, and information that you or the bishop deems important. So generally, the supervisory files have more confidential information, and it is related to the conduct and the performance of clergy. We post the supervisory files online. There, you see the link where they're posted there at the bomlibrary.org, and they're located within the BOM Handbook, Chapter 25. These file guidelines have been updated within the last year or so, so if you are familiar with the older version, you may want to refresh your memory on what these entail. And again, become familiar with the different kinds of information that is stored in the different files. When you get to Lake Junaluska, we will talk about how to maintain these, any questions that you might have related to record keeping. And if there are specific questions or issues related to file and record keeping that you want to make sure we address, please go ahead and send me those questions so I'll have a note of anything that I want to make sure I have notes of what you want to talk about. Okay, we have another poll. On this one, we are looking for your experience with the candidacy and ordination process. Another large portion of your work relates to candidacy, licensing, and ordination. The district superintendent nominates DCOM members on an annual basis and makes sure that the DCOM completes its work in accordance with the discipline and with the conference guidelines and deadlines. You also serve as a member of the district committee, and because this question often arises, I do believe that the district superintendent is a voting member of the district committee. The discipline does not prohibit any members from voting. However, I would say check with your cabinet and your bishop to see what the practice is in your annual conference for if district superintendents vote or not. But you will need to coordinate with the Board of Ordained Ministry regarding application deadlines, and the DCOM also needs to ensure that candidates applying for provisional membership or licensing meet conference and discipline requirements. The superintendent approves new applicants to become candidates and makes sure that those candidates are approved in the UM-Care system after they have completed the enrollment forms. So as I make final preparations for this workshop, if you could let me know your level of experience or your level of knowledge about the candidacy and ordination process, that would be great. So Jason?
All right, so the polling tool is opened up again, and choose the answer that is most applicable to you, and then click on the submit button so that it will record your response. Okay, most of you have had the opportunity to respond, a couple still, so I don't want to cut you off just yet. I'll give you a few more seconds there before I close down the poll.
And if you're someone who could teach the workshop, maybe I'll just give you a call and you could do
Substitute teacher.
Yeah, I've seen a few of the participants on this webinar, and I know many of you have done extensive work in this area.
That's great. All right, looks like everyone's had the opportunity to respond, so let me put the results up on the screen, and you should see those now.
Okay, excellent. So at least all of you say that you have experience and know at least what the candidacy process is. That's good to see. Some of you have served as mentors, and then most of you do have a basic understanding of the process. That'll be really helpful for our conversation, because when we get to Lake J, we do not spend a whole lot of time talking about the details of the process, but I do want to make sure that you know what kind of resources are available to help you with training your district committees on ordained ministry or working with your boards on issues related to candidates and to local pastors. Just as a refresher, and this is about as basic as we get, the work of the DCOM is covered in paragraph 666 of the Book of Discipline, and that paragraph highlights the 10 responsibilities that are assigned to the district committee, and then also highlights some of the DS responsibilities as related to credentialing. The cabinet and the board, as you know, have different responsibilities for credentialing, conference relations, deployment, and so it is pretty critical for all groups concerned with clergy to be on the same page regarding conference goals, needs, and strategy for fulfilling the conference's mission and vision. A couple things here that might be helpful to you become more familiar with. Your role as the DS includes identifying and enlisting high-quality candidates. This was a learning for me when I started resourcing district committees. It really is the district superintendent who approves candidates to begin the candidacy process. Once you approve them, they then start working with the District Committee on Ordained Ministry, but you are the one that allows them to begin candidacy. And then your responsibility for membership of the DCOM is critical. You nominate all the members, and you work with your Board of Ordained Ministry chair and with your bishop to make that happen. Terms for the DCOM are on an annual basis and can be renewed as the district superintendent sees fit. Keep in mind that the district committee is a subcommittee of the Board of Ordained Ministry, and one member of your DCOM should be assigned by the BOM to be a liaison between your committee and the Board of Ordained Ministry. So if you haven't had a chance to meet with your DCOM yet, do pay attention to the membership requirements for the District Committee on Ordained Ministry. Now would be a good time to make sure you have all those classes of different members covered as you're putting together your committees for the upcoming year. So how can you prepare for Lake Junaluska related to this? One thing I'd like you to do is to make sure that you have logged into, that you've received your invitation with a link to Cares, and that you have logged into the system and set up your role as a district superintendent. If you if you received that link but have not activated it yet, you may email support@umcares.org to receive a new link. And we did send the links to the official email addresses we received from GCFA when your appointment went live. So if you've been using Gmail or another non-conference account for your main email correspondence, you may want to check that official conference email conference email address if you haven't received the link. But we're happy to send you a new one and make sure that you're able to log into the system. Cares is our only national database of candidates. It's the entry point into Ezra, Cares Plus, or any other conference databases that track clergy throughout their service time. We use it to confirm people who apply for scholarships, and it helps us determine what the amount of the ministerial education funds are that are distributed to each seminary. Now to the service that we started last year, we are able to provide financial counseling for certified candidates with a partnership between GBHEM, WestPath, and EY. So as soon as a candidate is marked certified in the Cares system, we send a notice to EY and an invitation to the candidate, and then those financial counseling services that typically were only available to clergy in the United Methodist Church are also available to certified candidates. Your role in Cares is a pretty specific role as a district superintendent. New candidates are invited into the system by either you or another conference representative, and conferences do this differently, so you'll need to work with your Board of Ordained Ministry to figure out how that happens. However, you as the DS are the only one who is allowed to authorize and approve applicants to enter into the process, and this is, as I said, a disciplinary requirement. So the system is set up to reflect the disciplines requirement for the DS to admit applicants into the process. Once you admit that candidate into Cares, your work with Cares is completed. And like I said, you should have received that email. So just make sure that's set up, and we'll walk through the steps on how to do that. If you are having some trouble with Cares now, please feel free to contact us at the email addresses I provided, and we'll do what we can to get you up and running now. Again, so we won't go into detail about the steps for credentialing and for candidates. However, one of the handouts I emailed to you yesterday were the current credentialing steps for candidacy, for licensing, and ordination. And you may want to just read through that again, remind yourselves of what those are, and we will play a game and have some fun with some of those steps when you get to Lake Junaluska. That was the main portion of the content that I had to present to you today. I want to see if people have questions or things that I can help you with right now.
All right, so Meg, I'll jump in here and remind folks, send in your questions using the Q&A panel. You'll find the question mark icon there on the right-hand side of your screen, and when you click on that, that opens up the Q&A panel. That's how you send in your questions. A couple of chat messages here. Yes, for those of you that are on a mobile device, you'll find the Q&A panel underneath your menu options. So a couple extra taps for you there if you're on a mobile device, but you have the Q&A panel as well. All right, Meg, a couple of questions have come in regarding Cares. Do I need to get this account set up today? Is a few of them. What things do I need to play around with and get used to before the session at Lake J is the other series of questions regarding Cares. Okay, so no, you don't need to get this set up today. What I would like is if you have the chance before you get to Lake Junaluska to set it up and just make sure you're not having any problems accessing the account, and to make sure that your role is established in there as a district superintendent. Those of you who have served as candidacy mentors in the past will have a role already established as a candidacy mentor, so we need to make sure the shift gets from you being a mentor to you being a district superintendent. We will
Wi-Fi can be a bit tricky at Lake Junaluska, so we won't have a hands-on session per se with using the account, but I'll have screenshots there and some summaries of the steps that you need to take, just like a quick start guide. So we'll talk through some of that. And like I said, if you're having problems now or you're in the process now of needing to approve or invite some candidates, we can help you with that ahead of time. So once we get to Lake J, it'll be summary, quick start guides, and screenshots so that when you do get to the point of needing to use Cares, you'll have the steps in front of you that you need to take.
Okay, great. A couple of other questions have come in. Could you put the slide back up that had the BOM library web address back on there?
Yes, there it is.
Thank you very much. And folks, I'll remind you too that when we're done with our webinar today, a browser window will open up and will take you right to that web address, so you'll have the opportunity to bookmark it. But here it is up on the screen, and I'm sure you're going to add that to your favorites pretty shortly.
And we also have posted on the library information about district committees. We have all the action item forms that DCOMs need to fill out as they are making decisions about clergy and candidates. This is a dynamic site. We try to keep all the resources posted, and we update them as the discipline changes, as requirements change, and just make these really accessible for the kinds of forms that you'll need. Also, the checklist for administrative fair process that I emailed to you is there as well, and it's a fillable form that you're able to download or save online.
Okay, let me see here. Daniel has asked our next question, what does EY stand for that you refer to?
Yeah, that's Ernst & Young. They've rebranded themselves and they call themselves EY, but it's Ernst & Young, and WestPath has a partnership with them to provide financial counseling for candidates and clergy throughout the United Methodist Church. That service is available for free through WestPath benefits for all of our clergy.
Ernie says he's still struggling with the Cares. Not been a very friendly site for his experience. Who does he contact for a little bit of help to walk him through that?
Yeah, so Ernie, email support. No, I'm sorry. Just email me. Send an email to the email address we're going to give you at the end of this webinar, and we will respond to that. Sarah Ibarra-Skur is the administrator here in the office for Cares. She does a great job with orienting people to the system, and she'll be able to follow up with you on that today. Or you can email me directly at mlassiat@gbhem.org. Either one of those addresses will work.
Bruce asks our next question. A pastor recently appointed on July 1st of this year, so about 5 weeks ago by my math, just called this week and said that they're done. They're leaving. They're going home. How do I note this in the supervisory or personnel file for this pastor?
Yeah. So the first question, so is this a local pastor or an elder or a provisional member? What's the person's current status?
Bruce, if you could give some of that detail there in the Q&A and enlighten us. While we're waiting for that, Meg, give us a hypothetical on a local.
So if this is a local pastor, what you're going to need to do is make sure you receive his license back and note that he voluntarily discontinued from serving in ministry. Local pastors, it's a very quick exit, whether it's a voluntary exit by the local pastor or if the bishop or DS or DCOM chooses not to approve or appoint the local pastor for continued service. If this person is a provisional member, an associate member, or an elder or deacon, you're going to have to walk them through some leave of absence status, or they can voluntarily withdraw. So that's why there's different avenues depending on the situation and the status of the person.
Okay. Bruce says this is the case of an elder.
Case of an elder, they can voluntarily withdraw, and Bruce, I believe that's paragraph 365 in the discipline. I'm looking that up. No, I'm sorry. It's 360. So look at paragraph 360 in the Book of Discipline, and then it'll be either 360.1 or .2, depending on how this person is leaving. And the points there will walk you through how you need to note that on the credentials. The main thing is you need to get the credentials back so they get into the clergy person's personnel file. And I can, if you want to contact me personally afterwards, I'm happy to talk in more detail about this.
Great, some excellent questions that have come in, and folks, if you have more, please send those in. While I'm keeping an eye on the Q&A panel, Meg, why don't you tell us a little bit about what we need to do to get ready for Lake J?
Right, and I don't believe that this is new information for the participants, but we do ask that you read The Anatomy of Peace and Canoeing the Mountains. You can order those through Amazon or any bookstore. And then you should have received the 2-CD resource on the DS's first year. And again, email any questions, topics, scenarios you may want to explore more in detail during the workshops. We do some case studies and give you the chance to put some of the discipline and judicial council decisions into practice with how this plays out when you're dealing with clergy issues around credentialing, status change, things like that. And that's really, that's the bulk of it. I know this is the fourth of 4 webinars, so I'm hoping this information is not new to any of you. Here is this email address. If you need follow-up, contact us at ds-dcm@gbhem.org.
So Meg, we had another question come in for clarification. When we get the credentials back, does that mean that we're asking for their framed certificate off their wall? Is that the...
Yes. Yes, that's what it means. If they are turning in their ordination and turning in their membership, they should have 2 credentials. They should have a certificate of membership in the conference, and they should have their ordination certificate. And if they are withdrawing from the ordained ministry, the ordination certificate as well as the membership certificate comes back to us. They do not own those.
Okay, and I'm just going to type that in the response there too, so that we have that. I
That's
guess after 5 weeks, there's not a shadow behind the frame at this point.
Yeah, and that's why I say to look at the withdrawal paragraph, because some people will want to simply withdraw their membership from the church but retain their ordination to move to a different denomination, and then that is handled a little bit differently. If they're in good standing, they are allowed to keep their ordination certificate to transfer to a different denomination. If they're withdrawing under complaints and charges, then we require that the ordination and membership certificates back.
All right. Those are all the questions that I see so far.
Okay, great.
And for those of you that sent me a chat note earlier regarding the handouts, if you did not get the handout in your inbox, this is the email address here on the screen, right there. Send an email, and we'll make sure that you get the handout so that you can peruse through that before you get to Lake J.
And both of them also are posted on the BOM library. The credentialing steps are located under the DCOM and Candidacy resources, and the checklist for fair process is a link that you can click on just in the right-hand margin of the screen once you navigate to the site.
Scott asks, would it be better for a pastor to go through a voluntary leave of absence if they anticipate returning later on?
Yes, yes. Voluntary is controlled by the pastor. It's initiated by the clergy person, and the request to come off of the leave is also initiated by the clergy person. Now, the caveat is if there are complaints or charges pending, voluntary leave of absence is not an option for that person. And if it is a leave that is being strongly suggested or requested by the cabinet or the bishop, then involuntary leave of absence is the way to go.
Meg, how long can someone be on a voluntary leave of absence?
Technically, forever, but disciplinarily, the discipline does not have a time limit for voluntary leave. After 5 years, however, the approval majority from the clergy session changes. So those on voluntary leave are approved from year to year to stay on that leave. 1 to 5 years, it is a 50% majority from the clergy session, and then 5 years and forward, it jumps to a 2/3 majority. And in my work with boards of ordained ministry, most conferences now are moving toward getting people off of voluntary leave sooner rather than later. It's not meant to be a permanent status.
Yeah, so hypothetically speaking, if Meg, if there's a pastor that decides, okay, I need a break from this. This isn't for me. I'm going to go do something else, real estate or whatever, and then does voluntary leave of absence. 5 years later, they decide to come back. Is there like a refresher period, a recertification period? What do they do to knock the rust and the dust off?
Sure, and a lot of that's at the discretion of the board and the cabinet, a lot of it, but to come off of voluntary leave, the pastors or the clergy has to, they request and then ensure the board and the cabinet that any of the circumstances surrounding the request to go on leave have been alleviated. So the intent, I mean, the scenario you just listed up is an ideal intent for voluntary leave. If someone's just not sure if they want to continue, they need a couple of years to discern what their next steps might be, and then they decide they may want to come back. So they work with the cabinet to find an appointment that is appropriate for the cabinet and would work for their gifts and skills, and then work with the board to reinstate their status to appoint as ministry.
Okay, great. Thank you. We've got some great questions coming in here. Steve says he's inherited 2 sets of supervision files, personal notes and official files on each clergy. Any recommendation on what to do with these?
Yeah, this comes up. This is a question that does come up during the workshop often. And the way Bishop McAlilly addressed this last year was look through those personal notes, see if they're substantive, see if there's a pattern. You know, do you need to save every single note from your predecessor? Perhaps not. If there's an unresolved situation with a clergy person that these notes can help with, you may want to hold on to them. But if they seem to be time-stamped or temporary, of a more temporary nature, there's not a need to put everything into the personnel file. A lot of it is judgment. So a lot of it is your judgment.
Okay. Craig asks our next question, will the workshop at Lake J cover transfers between conferences? Yes,
it will. I can do that.
All right. Make a note. We're including that in.
Will do. Definitely.
And Deborah asks, while on voluntary leave, what reporting requirements are there?
I believe it is an annual report to the Board of Ordained Ministry that outlines any pastoral acts performed or ministerial services that you've been involved in. And I'd have to double check, but I believe that would go to the Board of Ordained Ministry as well as to the line District Superintendent, just to make sure the connection is maintained with the clergy person.
Okay, some great questions that have come in.
And voluntary leave is covered under paragraph 353 and outlines the reporting requirements there.
Michael asks, could you review the steps for discontinuing a local pastor?
Sure, yeah, I would be happy to do it. The summary steps for continuing a local pastor are that the District Committee on Ordained Ministry from year to year continues to say that this pastor is acceptable to be appointed in ministry. So you'll be looking at his or her effectiveness and willingness to continue serving. The other thing that we require with local pastors is that they are making appropriate progress in the course of study. And for full-time local pastors, that is 4 courses each year at an approved regional course of study school. For part-time local pastors, that is 2 courses each year, whether that's at an extension school or at a regional course of study school. And then the district committee, again, annually approves year to year the approval of the license, and the cabinet and bishop then decide if the local pastor will remain under appointment.
Okay, some great questions that have come in.
There's a lot. This workshop covers a whole lot of material. Yeah, the breadth is amazing.
It's great that we're able to have this webinar today and tackle some of those issues now. And I'll just remind folks that all of this is being recorded. So if you didn't have an opportunity to jot down some quick notes, don't worry about it. You can always come back and watch this again. and where I've been quick enough to capture the paragraph numbers, I've typed that in to the Q&A panel, so that you can go back and refer to what paragraph was that again? What did she say? I put it in there, so there you go. You can always refer back to that.
So when it comes to personnel issues, the 300 paragraphs are, your best friend or your worst enemy, depending on your perspective. But that's where all the information is. Yeah.
All right, Meg, I think that's all the questions that I see today. Yep, sure is. Wow, looks like we've gotten through it. That's awesome.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you for your time. Thank you for being here today. And I do try to keep the workshop session itself as interactive as possible. This will not be a lot of lectures, and we will be doing some case studies. So the more you can assimilate some of these resources and information into your memory before we get there, the better you might feel doing some of these exercises once we get there. But again, my main hope is to help you understand where resources are so that when you get into critical situations, you know how to find the support you need to do your job and to resource the clergy and candidates that you are working with. So thank you for your time today, and until I see you in a couple weeks, have a great rest of the summer, and I hope you've had some time for some relaxation and some vacation during the midst of all these moves and changes for you. So, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Meg. Appreciate it. And folks, as a reminder, the Tyrant session was recorded. You'll get the link in your email inbox. It takes about 24 hours or so be on the lookout for that. Here's the email address at the bottom of the screen if you did not get the handout. If you have questions, concerns, need help with Cares, that's the email address that you use. Right there. There you go. And thank you very much for participating with us today. We hope that you found this useful.